So it's great to speak today with Brendan Fox, Managing Director at Destination Sport Experiences. Brendan, how are you doing?
Hello, Gary. Yeah, I'm not bad. Yourself?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good
Yeah.
on this sunny day in this less than sunny country sometimes. So obviously we've got quite a few things to chat through today. Maybe what would be useful if you can kind of just tell us a bit about you. Obviously, I know a bit about you, but just for the purposes of this thing, tell us a bit about you and your background. That'd be probably a really good place to start, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I joined Destination Sport just over 12 months back. And prior to that, was at another sports travel company. And I'd been there for about 13 years. And then again, prior to that, I worked for all the big sort of UK travel companies such as, TUI and My Travel. So my background over the years has always been in the travel sector, but also as a keen cyclist, it's ideal for me. And then after years of sort of working with the London Marathon team, I actually finally did a marathon back, what was it, 2018? So
Right.
I've done three since then. So now I can class myself as a runner too.
So you run and you travel. You
Absolutely.
do travel. You do
I,
travel.
I
So
do try.
when was do we call it DSC, or do you go with the whole destination sport experiences? Do you abbreviate it at all? Or do you just
We do internally, but usually externally we don't.
you don't. So
But
externally, so it's when was destination sport experiences established then?
so myself and Alex DeWard started it in June 2021.
Right.
And then we took a few months to kind of put the team together and
Yep.
then put systems together.
Yep.
Um, and then it was a case of trying to have everything aligned in time for launching in October last year. So October being significant in the cycling world because that's when the route announcement for the Tour de France is and the Giro d'Italia, and also events such as the Etape de Tour are announced, so they go on sale. So we needed to get everything aligned for that period, and fortunately we did, and went straight on sale and had a great start, frankly. So, and there's been no looking back since then, really, Gary.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about because there's been loads that you guys have been doing, which I think would be really interesting to unlock. So maybe before we get into that, could you sort of talk about what you offer the traveling athlete? Because essentially, I guess you service predominantly the traveling athlete, whether that's
Yeah,
within a country or obviously overseas or international travel.
yeah, that's right. So I think it's important people know that, as Destination Sport Experiences, we sit within a much larger UK travel group.
Hmm.
So that UK travel group is called Portman Travel. And strategically, they've decided to do more within the sports travel sector. They look after a lot of the professional sports teams, like, say, Manchester United, City, Liverpool, in terms of their travel to some of the events, especially internationally.
Hmm.
Um, they also have have an operation called sportsbreaks.com. Now, Sports Breaks is all about consumers being able to go and see like soccer games, cricket, rugby, Formula One. So that's an important sector, and a sector which is recovering fast post COVID too. Um, but the area they didn't have was the mass participation endurance side. And that's where we came in. Now, as we are part of that much bigger group, where we actually really benefit is on a lot of the economies of scale. So
Right.
we're able to tap into the likes of the hotel rates that, say, Clarity, the business travel side of the business, can access, and a lot of, like rail and air, and then also use some of their other suppliers, plus their IT kit.
Mm.
So for us, as Destination Sport Experience, we were like a startup, but a startup with a lot of help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we couldn't have got to where we got as fast if it hadn't have been for that backing of that larger travel group. So, how does that sort of then translate into being able to help the athlete, a lot of that really is about, those lower rates. So we're able to pass on those lower rates to the athletes. Flexibility as well. That's a major part in all this. But for us as a team, because we are cyclists, we are runners, we are swimmers. We've done those events in the past that our customers do. So we can use our experience and our knowledge to make life a lot easier for them. So we focus on the hard work of the travel side, the logistics, and then that takes that pressure off the athletes. So an example, at the Etap this year, we had block book at the top of Alpe d'Huez, so that when the cyclists got to the top of Alpe d'Huez, all they needed to do was go back to their apartment or back to the hotel room and just crash and recover.
Yeah.
They didn't have to worry about another transfer, 2 hours or 3 hours, or try and find a bag if it was somewhere. So because we have been in those positions ourselves, it's easy for us, well, say easy, but it's easier for us to comprehend that and hopefully come up with a solution for the athletes.
Yes, it's essentially, it's about that experience. It's the key aspect to whether you're spectating at the Tour de France or whether you're participating in the Etape. As you say, it's about knowing that you haven't got the hassle, I guess, and the experience you have, because time is precious, isn't it? So I'm guessing, and as you say, you've done it too. So other types you've done. You obviously, we mentioned cycling. Do you want to maybe talk a bit about marathon tours and travel and how that came about, and also what the future holds for your run portfolio specifically?
Yeah, that's right. Marathon Tours and Travel is the world's largest run and travel company. I've known Tom Gilligan, the founder there, for over 10 years, and built a good relationship with him and his team, including the president there, Jeff Adams. Now, Tom created that company 43 years ago. So, I've been running around the world for 43 years. But I knew that, there was a point in time that Tom would, want to spend a bit more time in the golf club and, less time in the office. So, we had a good chat and, quite quickly came to an agreement for the future. And I think from Tom's point of view, working with, say, us is enabling Marathon Tours and Travel to become more global. And, with their reputation, with their brand reputation being as good as it is, there's so much more we can accomplish together. So what we're doing at the moment is we're in the process of rolling out Marathon Tours and Travel across the world. If you look in the UK, what started as being Destination Sport Experiences is now Marathon Tours and Travel in the UK. Right. Before the end of the year, we'll launch Marathon Tours and Travel in Australia. We set that company up earlier this year. We've got employees on the ground there in Australia. Right, so we'll have that launched, and then we're looking at other opportunities or possibilities in certain other countries. For us, having that much larger global running brand, the benefits are really immense. Economies of scale from hotel buying.
Yeah, so it's not just about moving UK runners to the marathon majors. It's about moving Australians to the majors and all other events that they might be wanting to do. And so I see that.
And also, if you can take any event in any part of the world, and you'll have runners coming in internationally, but then you'll have runners at those events who might want to go off and do another event elsewhere. And there's certain countries obviously that have got good relationships between those countries, so there's good historic ties, so they are more likely to send runners to those historic countries. So there's a lot of the world is a smaller place. It's so much easier to get around. So from our point of view, there's so much more we can do with that. And we can also see like the operational costs on the ground, they drop. You know, so for the autumn, and I have said autumn this time instead of fall, because
You can say both.
I keep saying fall
Autumn
because
slash fall, it's fine.
that's it. Keeps up with the Boston guys so much. I'm starting to, you know, pick up their words. But you know, for the autumn time, you know, our operational teams on the grounds will be, you know, a combination of US and British plus local. We do use a lot of local staff
Yeah,
in some of the areas we go to, the destinations, because those guys know better than us a lot, who come in for, you know, once a year or maybe twice a year. So that will help a lot. And then, you know, there'll be a lot more events offered too, because that economies of scale, as you scale up, does actually start meaning that maybe some of the more marginal events or trips we might have done in the past suddenly become a lot more economical. So, you know, by the time you're pulling in the customers from the US, the UK, Australia, you know, it does make a difference.
yeah,
But that's not to say that what you offer the US, the UK, and the Australian market is the same thing.
yeah.
You know,
Okay.
the UK going to Europe are most likely after a shorter trip, and maybe they don't want the extra sort of activities that maybe the American market might want. So somebody going to say Berlin might want to go there for 2 or 3 days from the UK, whereas the American market they prefer a longer trip.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
might be the only time, or maybe the once in 10 or 20 years that they visit Berlin. So they want to see the other stuff that they can see in that neck of the
Mm,
woods, which is
mm.
great. So we're able to sort of tailor whatever for you know, whatever source market there is.
Yeah. So just to kind of clarify, obviously for those bigger, more, let's say, competitive events to get into, where there's the ballot, you're offering access to those, as well as the smaller events that, as you say, that might might be more marginal at the moment, but you can offer opportunities to help grow those events on the ground too. So maybe could you talk through how you access the tickets on the ballots? Because just in case anyone isn't aware about how you operate and how you can get a so-called
Yeah.
guaranteed entry into a race, which might be tricky to get into because of the demand.
Yeah, that's right. You see, all events are different. The dynamics are different. So how they treat maybe some of the international athletes can vary.
Right.
Um, some of the world markets attract a financial premium for entries, because that way it gives those international runners a guaranteed route into an event. Now, that's good because that means that those international runners can plan much further ahead with the travel. But also, you know, from an economic standpoint, those runners or those cyclists or triathletes are also bringing in economic benefit to those destinations. So if you know, if you look at New York Marathon will have over 50,000 runners on the start line this year. Around about 20,000 of those runners will be internationals, and in the majority of cases, they'll be coming in for at least 4 nights average, maybe longer. So you know, if you think about, you know, what 20,000 athletes plus non-running partners
Yep.
is worth for 4 nights coming into New York, it's a huge benefit to that city. Um, so you know, from an event organizer's point of view, they can use that to leverage with some of the local authorities, whether it's the police department or local councils, whatever, to give them support. But it does help those international athletes get into those events and plan so far in advance, which is important for them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so conscious of time, but got a few things I want to talk about. You mentioned the C word earlier, and we haven't. It's really weird that we've been talking about travel, and we haven't really been speaking about COVID.
Mm.
And so clearly, you set up whilst the pandemic was. I wouldn't say it's full hype, but clearly it was still a thing, and it still is a thing. But maybe you could talk about the pandemic and also particularly post-pandemic, because you seem to be pretty optimistic But it has been challenging, certainly for event organisers, and I guess obviously for tour operators too. So maybe talk a bit about the challenges you face and whether you're optimistic about the future, and I suppose the way you've adapted to it.
Yeah, it's certainly been a challenge, and if you look at any of the numbers, the hardest hit sector is the travel sector.
Yeah.
It's the GDP figures and the contribution to GDP. If you look at what travel does, it's been hit much worse than anybody else. And, without becoming political, the support
We've
for
had
the
enough of
travel,
politics
I
anywhere
know,
in the
but
world. It's not talk
the
politics.
support for the UK travel industry has been appalling. And the laws under which we operate they're not designed to deal with a pandemic, and some of the European countries were very good at recognizing that and assisting the travel companies. However, it's well known that the UK government weren't. So there's been a number of issues from their inaction from that.
You're being very restrained.
Yeah, I haven't had a pint yet, Gary.
You might need
Too
one.
early. Don't get me started. But the in terms of how it really has affected us, and it's obviously affected the athletes hugely, and the event organisers. You got to feel for so many event organisers, because they need the entry fee income to fund their operations across the year.
Yeah.
And if they don't have that, then they can't operate. And, when some of the events were cancelled and, they're under pressure to refund the entry fees, totally get it from an athlete point of view. You've paid for something you've not got, therefore you want a refund. From the entry or the event organizer's point of view, they've got no income. And actually, a lot of the money's been spent on putting the systems in, buying stuff, ordering T-shirts, ordering metal. So the whole sector has been literally decimated over the last 2 years. Now, you can see it in the way a lot of events organised. They gave rollovers to future years, which helped. Or help the athletes. Didn't really help the organisers, to be honest, but they helped the athletes. And we can still see within 22 there's a lot of rollover still happening, and 23 will be the same. There's still so much uncertainty about COVID, so people are leaving things until the last minute to actually either book or turn up. We know a number of UK events this year that people hadn't sorted out the hotel room by the Friday night for the Sunday, just in case they caught COVID and couldn't run. So, it's still affecting. You can see the Vuelta España at the moment. There's a number of COVID cases, but eventually it will come out of the system. And, from my point of view, you've got to look forward optimistically to 23 and to 24. But at the same time, you need to manage the risk on the business. So what you don't want to do is put down a lot of money committing to something or commit to a lot of rooms and then suddenly find nobody can turn up because everybody's got COVID again. But you paid the hotelier, he's got your money. So it's a really big, still a concern, less of, but still something that's preying on your mind the whole time.
Yeah. So I suppose in terms of the other C word would be cost of living. So is that a concern for you? Because
definitely.
It's going to hit everybody. It's almost like this iceberg that we're sailing towards. You almost feel like we're on the Titanic, and the band's still playing, but no one's really quite sure when we're going to hit this thing. But I'm guessing it feels pretty imminent to you. Are you seeing anything in your numbers and bookings, or is it still pretty buoyant?
It's difficult to say if we can see it in the numbers or not. It's definitely a topic of conversation, and that's a topic of conversation with suppliers too, because obviously when we're talking to suppliers, the hoteliers, and saying, well, look, we're not sure how many rooms because we don't know what impact the cost of living will have. The biggest impact is ultimately it reduces consumers' disposable income, because they need to put the priority payments, priority bills first. So, you know, if you think that your energy bill might double in the year and you're already paying £2,000 or £3,000 a year on your energy bill, then that's £2,000 or £3,000 that's going to come out of your disposable income for next year. You know, that could be the family holiday, you know, that could be the new bike, it could be anything, you know. It's massive, but we don't, again, because none of us are clear on the support from the UK government, that we can't plan. So potentially at the moment, people might be either really struggling to meet those bills, which many people are, or possibly some people are putting aside just in case. But where I think your spend is discretionary, and that does come to events, then that could be an impact. The only thing that I will say is that if you go back to the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, I don't think events were hit as badly at that point, because if you're a runner or you're a cyclist and your goal is to take part in that marathon or that cycling event, then you're going to still try and do it if you can. So if we end up in the same situation as we were in that financial crisis, then it might not be too bad from an event point of view. But then this current financial crisis does seem like it's hitting consumers more and harder.
Yeah.
The inflation.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Obviously, within endurance sport, certainly within triathlon in particular, but with most endurance sports, you feel like it's a slightly insulated demographic, in that it's generally a middle earner, which is kind of good and bad, because I think some sports, certainly triathlon, aren't very good at recruiting younger people, and it seems to be more of a rich man sport in some respect. Which means, yes, it might be insulated, but it needs to grow. It needs to be bringing in and making itself more open and accessible. So I guess that for those kinds of sports, it might be a challenge to bring people in. But you're right that at least those that are still in there doing the sport, they should be traveling. I've got two more things, really conscious of time, but two things be good to touch upon. Firstly, not much has been spoken about the environment. Like, Greta's gone a bit quiet. And maybe, you know, what your thoughts are. You've obviously done a deal with UCI on the World Championships in Glasgow, which is great. Clearly, carbon footprint is an issue. Sustainability is an issue. How do you work with event partners? And obviously, travel is a thing that, you know, we have a footprint when doing. So, good to get your perspective briefly on that, if that's okay. About that for a whole half hour, but maybe you're
absolutely right. And you know, it's a big focus for event partners. Having traveled on the Eurostar last weekend with somebody from Eurostar and having a good discussion with them about this particular point, there's, you know, travel obviously involves traveling around the place, and it's how you travel can affect, you know, the environment, etc. And a lot of the event partners that we work with are trying to do their best for it. So I know, as part of the UCI Cycling World Championships in Glasgow and across Scotland next year, part of what we need to do is measure that sort of carbon footprint of our customers. And a lot of the planning which we're currently undertaking does involve examining what's the best environmentally friendly way of moving around. And so that comes into our factory. And then, you know, can we use train more than roads, more than air on certain events? And, you know, just even moving staff around, you know, how do staff move around? But one of the things I did touch on earlier, we have employed more local people this year for our operations. And one of the factors in that was, well, that saves us flying in somebody from the UK. So therefore we'll save on that carbon emissions from that bit of the travel. Now we can't get away totally from it, but we can try to do what we can to reduce the impact of the travel. So it's certainly a massive factor, Gary, in
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. As you say, it will be shaping things in the future, going forwards. In particular, I suppose, just to sort of end with that, you mentioned certainly 2020, 21 participation massively hit. There's been this rollover of events. We looking at participation, it does see that in most cases things are down. We're not back at that 2019 level yet, but hopefully, this year, but hopefully by 2023 we will be recovered, if you like, from the pandemic dip. How are you looking at the next few years? Are you optimistic? Do you feel that there's some things that you'd like to see done within the industry? Just general thoughts on the outlook, if you like, for endurance sport participation in general.
Yeah, I think it's about everybody working together just to manage those risks. And with some of the event organizers, making sure that they're, not so much that they're not overextending themselves, but certainly they've got flexibility that if maybe they don't have the numbers come to their events, then they don't end up taking a hit from it, a big hit. Like you said before, there's a lot of events this summer, especially in the UK, that have not had the numbers that they typically would have had. But then you have had events that have completely sold out, partly because maybe there were some rollovers. Certainly some of the big cycling events have done very well this year. The Tap to Tour, Ride London did really well with its numbers. But maybe some of it does tend to be those kind of second, third tier marathons or other events which haven't done as well. So I think there is about, everybody listening to each other and managing each other's risks. But, it will come back because these things are cyclical. So that's not an issue. And, certainly within the UK, we saw what happened during the pandemic. So many more people started running.
Yep.
And so many more people started cycling. So we need to somehow translate that level of participation into joining events. And then I think we will really be in a big role. So I'm still very confident and optimistic that things will get back to where they were and beyond, frankly.
Splendid. Well, it's always good to end on a positive note. We need to be positive in these challenging times. So I just want to say thanks ever so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and wishing you all the best with all that you're doing going forwards.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. It's always great to catch up.
Splendid. Cheers. Okay, take care, Brendan.
Cheers.
Thanks again.
Cheers, Gary.
Yeah.